Your friends won't stop parking in my driveway? Congrats, your parents know you vape at 16. My neighbors have a teenage son whose friends keep you parking in my driveway. I went to check my mail last week and saw them all out front and decided to nicely bring it up, which was met with eye rolls and fake okays. Monday comes around and I come home to find 3 of his friends' cars taking all the space I have to park. It was a 14-hour day for me, so I wasn't having it and made my second approach with intention to make myself very clear and said I'd make it the neighbor's son's problem. Tonight I get home and it's happened again. I went next door and an adult finally answered. I brought up the cars at my place and added a side note the kid never expected. He's also been throwing his disposable vapes in my yard and I have the other neighbor as a witness. So I casually asked them to make sure that stops, and the instant change in expression told me everything I needed to know after I walked away. Shortly after his friends left, and I can assume they probably won't be back for a while. Happy spring break, kid. Coworker tried to claim my 15-page report as her own work to the CEO, got outed in front of him. This was a young woman who only got her job, especially made for her, because her dad was golfing buddies with our CEO. She regularly blamed her team for her numerous mistakes, and took all the credit for their hard work. Let's call her Itch. I used to do trade shows and after the fall season would be back in the office and create a comprehensive report on the results of the shows, normally 15+ pages. The Veeps always wanted paper reports, not attachments, so I normally printed them out and distributed them personally to the staff. I handed Itch her copy as we passed in the corridor, then watched in sheer amazement as she marched straight into the CEO's office and said, I kid you not. Here, boss, I just put this together for you. Stunning, the report was all about trade shows, and she wasn't even in the same department. Cue the revenge. I marched in there right after her, and said, oh, Itch, I just realized that my report has some numerical errors. Let me have it back and I'll get you a revised one. All the while staring at the CEO with a slightly raised eyebrow. As I left, I heard the most wonderful words from the CEO. Aiku, would you please close the door as you leave? Itch came out about 5 minutes later looking like a ripe tomato. I couldn't resist asking, how was your little tete-a-tete with our boss? Girl who played me ends up getting played by the dude she cheated on me with. Myself, M26, and my ex, F24, let's call her M, had been dating for about 6 months. The first 5 months were great. We started off slow, seeing each other once or twice a week for the first month. I realized I really liked this girl after our 4th date. She came back to my place that night and magic happened. After that, we started talking every day and I basically had zero desire to talk to any other women. I deleted my dating apps, cut contact with this other girl I had seen a couple times right before I met M, and felt good that me and M had a good thing going. I include these details because it's important to an incident that happens down the road. For the next 5 months we went out every weekend, spending almost every whole weekend together. So one night after a night out having food and seeing a comedy show, she's just in an awful mood. There were about 6 comedians performing one after the other. This first dude came up and had that whole itches ain't hit blah 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 don't ever settle act. It got laughs but not from me. After his set immediately, my girlfriend leaned over and asked what that was all about. I just shrugged and said he thinks negatively of women, it's a comedy show so take it with a grain of salt. She just said, I know, but then the whole rest of the show she couldn't find anything funny. Fast forward to the second to last guy who had a funny story about heist cheating ex but no hatred in his voice. He seemed over it and did not badmouth her at all, especially compared to the first guy. M wanted to leave after this and I didn't object because I could tell she was not enjoying herself. The car ride home was absolute projecting at its finest. For 15 minutes I was hit with accusations of finding misogyny to be okay and that I'm probably cheating on her because all men do it. While I was driving I literally unlocked my phone telling her to look through my texts. Wasn't enough. I dropped her off and she said we're finished and that she had never seen this side of me before. I sat there shocked and at a loss for words. She got out and didn't turn back, just walked in her house, not gonna lie. I cried on the drive home once I was out of her presence. It was that helpless feeling of thinking you did everything right but realizing it's not gonna work. A month passes by and I sort of am over it. I had reached out once being ignored on, then the feelings dissipated gradually with no contact between us. Hindsight really is a itch. Why didn't I see through the BS sooner? Fast forward to a Friday night where I'm just hanging with a couple buddies. I get a call from an unknown number. I ignore it. 5 minutes later a text. Hey man, I think you and I should talk. You know M, I saw her text between you two and I think you're gonna enjoy this. I could feel this grin coming across my face as I realized what was happening. I knew before he told me. I call him Anda basically told me that she was playing both Ofus. Except this dude had a far worse end of the stick. Come to find out they've been married for 2 years and he was home in Brazil taking care of his dying mother for the last 6 months. He reassured Mehe was not mad at me and that he knew I was a good guy. I just felt bad for the guy at this point. Here's the best part. He then explains to me that this past weekend they drove, in his registered car, about 6 hours out of town for a concert and weekend getaway. At the concert, her phone died and he went to use the bathroom. He slipped away, drove back home in his car and packed all her hit up out of their house. He then drove another 90 minutes to her parents' house explaining the whole situation and dropped all her hit off there. He blocked her number after she demanded he pay for her flight home. Let's just say her parents aren't too proud of their daughter's decisions and have reached out to her husband numerous times begging for his forgiveness. What a guy to reach out to me and share his delicious shenanigans. Still friends. Build me an expensive fence. One night I had a knock at my door from the funeral home owners down the street. They told me that they had just bought the property between us and we going to demolish the house to build a parking lot. They said that they wanted to build a nice vinyl fence between us and that they would pay for everything. All they needed from me was to sign an agreement saying that it was okay for them to build the fence. This agreement was 3 pages long. I told them that I would be happy to take the agreement and sign it tomorrow because it was already 9 p.m. They told me that they couldn't leave the document with me and that I had to sign it right now. I responded that I don't ever sign legal documents without reading them completely and thought he don't have time right now to read them, then suggested that they mail me a copy. After this, they got very pushy and told me that I have to sign it and I have to do it right now. At this point, I told them to get off my property and slammed my door shut. I did some research and city code required them to build a very specific type of fence because we had 2 different zonings of property next to each other. A bit later, they built a foam core concrete fence that was 8 feet tall. It looked good, and to an untrained eye looked to meet the requirements of the city ordinance. At this time, I also received a letter from their lawyer about the old wooden fence that they also left standing was on their side of the property line and that if I tore it down, repaired it, or did anything else to it that they would take legal action against me. Cue the petty revenge. I found a city ordinance that outlaws a fence within a fence. It basically says that there is only 1 fence allowed per property line. I took that to the city planning commission and they forced my neighbor to remove the wooden fence. I refused to allow him or his workers onto my property. After that was completed, I went back to the planning commission to demand that the correct fence be built. City ordinance stipulated an 8-foot tall solid masonry fence and explicitly forbid the use of foam core fencing in this situation. The commission sided with Mai and made him tear out this brand new fence. After that, he put up a temporary chain link, freestanding fence between our properties. The wind kept blowing it down, so I asked him to take care of it. He told me to figure it out myself, so I welded his rented fence pieces together. They were no longer portable, but they stopped blowing down. They were also taking a long time to get the permanent fence in, so I ordered a Borat-style neon green Speedo. You should Google it to really understand. I then wore that during the nights in the summer while I sat at my fire pit. The guests of funerals could clearly see all of me lit up in the twilight. I like to think that this helped motivate them to put in an opaque fence. When he finally put in the correct fence, his workers trampled about 30 feet of my rose bushes and killed them, so I had the planning commission order him to pay me damages for the roses. The workers also broke some of my sprinklers and I was able to force him to repair those too. To top this all off, he stained his side of the new fence and left mine with only stain splatters and stain drips. Since I was batting 1,000, I went back to the city ordinances and found one that prohibited this exact situation. Back to the commission I went. After more fighting, he had to pay to stain my side of the fence too. It took 5.5 years of petty revenge, but now I have a beautiful tall fence to keep my yard quiet and safe. It added a lot of value to my property too. Hey Mr. and Mrs. Funeral Home, sign that. Edit 1. I added the Borat part that my sister-in-law reminded me of. You want to be the daughter-in-law to my husband's family? I'll tell your fiancé. My husband and I have been married for some years. Before we got together, he told me he had a daughter from a previous relationship. I understood and still chose to be with him. He is a great father to his daughter and I love her with all my heart. My stepdaughter is kind, smart and considerate. Her mother on the hand not so much. When we first began dating, he had no issues with seeing his daughter. Once we got engaged, that's when trouble began to start. Even though she's engaged, she's basically tried to ruin his relationship with his daughter. She would intentionally not let him see her and even kept hair away for 9 months. She took him to court for child support as well as a set time to finally get to see his daughter. I thought everything would be fine. Come time for us to get married and we asked if daughter could attend wedding. We asked 2 months in advance. No answer, no text message, just left unread. This was the week he was supposed to have her for holiday and we basically got ignored due to her mother not wanting her to be there. We ended up having a wedding without her. I could tell my husband was heartbroken because he wanted her to be a part of our day. I was crushed myself because I also wanted her to be. I received a phone call from my mill a day after the wedding stating that stepdaughter's mother had called and said even though my husband got married she will always be her daughter-in-law, not me. In response my mill laughed her off the phone. The following day was Christmas. We picked up my stepdaughter and brought her to our home to open presents. After that we had to take her back to meet her mother. Upon arriving we were met by stepdaughter's mother fiancé congratulating us on our nuptials. The mother steps out the car and asks if she could talk to me. A little backstory, I never speak to her. A hello and goodbye is basically all I say. I desire to speak to her due to her attitude as well as calling me out my name. My stepdaughter gets in the car and her mother proceeds to congratulate us as well. She asks if we could do a double date so she could get to know me. I tell her no thank you. They both proceed to call me rude. I then proceed to explain how she made a phone call to my mill about how she will always be the daughter-in-law, not me. The look on her fiancé's face was priceless. You both should have left it. No. I can humbly decline. Now both of you look stupid.